Welcome back. My name is MrCaproni, and this is your probability and statistics course. Today, we're going to be talking about control within an experiment. Now, this is an absolute crazy world that we live in, and sometimes that can have a negative impact on the results of your experiment. So today, we're going to talk about all the tips and tricks that will keep us on track to have a controlled experiment. So please join me as we start breaking this down. So there's actually a lot of studies about how color can affect customers in a restaurant. For example, if you look at a lot of fast food companies, they like to use a lot of reds and yellows because it makes you eat your food faster and get out. And when you're dealing with fast food, you want your customers to come in and out quickly so you can serve as many people as possible. I know. Some of you guys are running through all of the different fast food places right now to see how many of their logos actually have red or yellow in it. It can be kind of shocking. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. You thought they actually cared about you. Because of this, a lot of companies have experimented with different colors to see if it can either raise sales or change the attitude of the people in their room. So, a coffee shop goes ahead and they decide, oh, we're going to paint our walls a burnt orange and see if that gets people to buy more coffee. So they decide that they want to run an experiment to see how this goes. The first thing they do is they monitor how many sales they have for a few months. Then at the end of the few months, they go ahead and they paint all of their walls. After that, they record the next few months of sales to see if there was an increase. Now, unfortunately, in the same weekend that they went ahead and painted the coffee shop, a new movie theater opened up in the mall across the street. Now, because of that movie theater, they got a whole bunch of new customers. But the problem is, via the experiment, do we know if those customers came because they painted the color of the shop, or is it because the new movie theater opened? In this case, the movie theater is what we call a confounding variable. That means that you essentially don't know if the results of your experiment were because of what you did or what something else in the world caused. This is a lack of control. So there are tons of different ways this can happen. This is just one example, but there are always things in our world that are altering the results of our experiment. So now we're going to start going through a few tips and tricks where we want to actually see what can we do to try to prevent confounding variables from happening. So in a previous video, we talked about how whenever you're doing an experiment, some people get the treatment and some people don't. The people that don't get it is called your control group. Now here's the problem. What if your control group or your treatment group were made up of a specific type of person? For example, if I created a new diet pill that was supposed to help you lose weight, but I ended up giving the diet pill as the treatment to all people under the age of 30, and we saw some great results, how would I know if the results came from the actual pill itself or from the age of the people that were in my experiment? Also, how do I know if that pill would have bad effects on people over the age of 30? We don't. So, for that reason, there are lots of different ways that we can set up our control and treatment group so that it's more random and mixed with the type of people we're working with. We got three different ways to go ahead and try to insert this idea of randomness into which people get the treatment and which ones don't. The first one we're going to look at is completely. When you're completely splitting up your group, you assign a number to each one. Then once you assign the number, you go ahead and use a random number generator to split them into your control and treatment group. Now, sometimes this can turn out bad, and you could maybe turn out with all of one gender in a group or something. Really, it's just a toss of the dice, and you hope for the best, but it will remove any of your own personal judgment bias of the situation. The second type is matched pair. Matched pair is where you're going to group each of your people with another person very similar to them. Then you go ahead and you randomly select one from each pairing to give the control group and one to put in the treatment group. That way, when you're all said and done, you can have a really good comparison because each one of your control people have a treatment person that is very similar to them in all ways, shape, or form. The last type is called blocked, which is where I separate them by a characteristic first, in this case, color, and then I assign numbers and randomly split each one of my blocked groups so that one half of them is in the control and the other half is in treatment. This again is random and I'm not picking myself, but it does allow for me to avoid things like having all of one color end up in one of my groups or the other. Sometimes the confounding variable that occurs is the actual mental stability of the people you're doing the experiment on. A great example of this is when a little child will fall and scrape their knee. And sometimes their parent will walk over and say, "Oh, well, let me kiss the boo boo and it'll feel all better." Now, the child was screaming beforehand, but now magically, after the parent kisses the boo boo, the child stops screaming and feels better. Does this mean that the parent was magical and capable of healing a child through a kiss? No. This is actually a phenomenon that we call a placebo effect. In order to dive into that, let's talk about what a placebo is. A placebo is a harmless fake treatment that is made to look like the real thing. The reason you use it is because let's go back to my diet pill example. Sometimes when I'm running an experiment, the moment a person knows that they're not getting the actual treatment, they may give up on themselves and let go because they're like, why bother trying to lose weight if I know I'm part of the group that didn't get the treatment? So instead, you introduce a fake pill that really does nothing for you, but it makes a participant not be sure whether or not they got the treatment or not. That way, everybody is on the same foot when they decide whether or not they're going to fight to try to lose weight. And this leads us back to the placebo effect. The placebo effect is when you experience the results of the treatment even though you got the placebo. So just because mentally you think you got the real thing, you magically start believing that you're getting better or losing weight in this case. It's just like the child who got kissed by their parent. Even though they received a placebo in the form of a magical kiss, they still feel better because mentally they believe that they were given something that was capable of treating them. And this leads us to our last technique for control in an experiment, and it's called blinding. Blinding is just when you finagle the situation so that the participants don't know if they're getting the placebo or the real treatment. That way, everyone mentally is on the same foot. Spoiler alert, in the world we live in, people suck. Which means if I want to sell my diet pill, I need to make sure it looks like it works. For that reason, when I pass out the placebo and the real treatment, I'm going to give the real treatment to the people that I think have the best chance of losing weight. That way I can prove my results. To prevent this shady line of thinking, they had to come up with another technique called double blinding. So if blinding's when the participant doesn't know if they get the placebo or the real treatment, double blinding's when the participant and the person giving it to them don't know which one's which. So they have to hire a third party to come in and separate out the placebos and the real treatments and then give them to the person administrating them without telling which one's which, and then having them give it to the participants. That way, no one involved knows what they're getting. So I can't be shady, and the participant isn't going to have that mental block that we talked about earlier. Double blinding seems intense and extreme, but it's one way to keep your experiment valid and let other people know that you're trying to be legit and not shady. Holy cow, guys, we have covered a ton of material here. I would highly suggest that you look back through this video at some of the important vocab that we've covered to make sure you have a firm understanding of everything that's going on. With that said, we are going to call it a wrap for the day. Now, remember, we've been talking about control for experiments. We went through different types of randomizing your groups. We talked about blinding, double blinding, placebo, the placebo effect, and we've talked overall the importance of trying to keep your experiment legit. So thanks for joining me. Remember, if you learned something new, go ahead and hit the like button below. And if you want to keep getting videos like this, go ahead and click subscribe to see my new videos each week. Remember, my name is MrCaproni, and thanks for joining me for Probability and Statistics.